Social media made everything worse. My feed was a highlight reel of perfect lives. Holidays, outfits, endless brunches. I knew it was curated, but it still made me feel inadequate. I booked trips I couldn't afford just for the photos, chasing validation in likes and comments. The high was fleeting, the debt was real. I was spending to impress strangers, not to enrich my own life. The more I tried to keep up, the more isolated I felt. In the end, I was left with bills and emptiness, not belonging. I left school knowing Shakespeare, but nothing about taxes, credit, or budgeting. We're taught how to earn money, not how to manage it. Suddenly, I was in a world of credit cards and buy now, pay later schemes, with no idea what APR or overdraft meant. If I'd learned the basics early, maybe things would have been different. In my early 20s, I felt invincible. Like the future was a long, open road full of possibilities. I thought I had all the time in the world to sort things out. When I got my first credit card, I didn't think about the consequences. I assumed future me would handle it. That optimism gave me courage to chase my dreams, but with money it became recklessness. I was blind to the hole I was digging for myself. Finally, I have to acknowledge the role that my family's attitude towards money played. It wasn't that they gave me bad advice. It was that they didn't give me any advice at all. In my house, growing up, money was a topic that was simply never discussed. It was a private, almost taboo subject. We weren't poor, but we weren't rich either. My parents were careful, frugal people, but they never spoke about their income, their mortgage, or their savings. It was all handled quietly, behind closed doors. This silence taught me that money was something to be worried about, but not something to be talked about openly. This unspoken rule created a sense of shame around financial matters. If we weren't supposed to talk about it, then having a problem with it must be a really bad thing. It implied that financial struggles were a personal failure, something to be hidden away. This is why, when I first got into trouble, the thought of telling my parents was impossible. It would have felt like confessing a terrible secret. I was convinced they would be horrified and deeply disappointed in me. I didn't want to break the unspoken family code, and I certainly didn't want to burden them with my self-inflicted problems. This culture of silence meant I had no one to turn to for practical guidance. I couldn't ask my dad what APR meant without admitting I had a credit card I was struggling with. I couldn't ask my mum for budgeting tips without revealing that my finances were in chaos. The silence that was meant to keep things polite and private actually fostered an environment of ignorance and isolation. I was left to figure things out on my own, and without a solid foundation, I relied on the loud, flashy messages from society and advertising, which were all about spending, not saving. This legacy of silence is something I see in so many other families too. We can talk about our relationships, our health problems, our career anxieties, but money remains the final frontier of conversational taboos. It's a pattern that gets passed down through generations. Because my parents never talked about it, I never learned how to talk about it. And because I couldn't talk about it, I couldn't ask for help. Breaking that cycle, for myself and hopefully for any family I might have in the future, has become one of the most important lessons from this whole sorry mess. The first step to fixing a problem is admitting you have one. After that call, denial shattered. The numbers on the spreadsheet were real, but the true burden was emotional. Shame and guilt I carried every day. Secrets are exhausting. Every interaction felt like a performance, and I started pulling away from friends, too ashamed to join their effortless lives. The weight of the secret wasn't just about money, it was about the story I told myself, one that wasn't kind. Living with debt is like paying an extra tax on everything you do. It's the anxiety tax. It's not a financial cost, but an emotional one, and the interest rate is brutally high. My baseline emotional state became a low-level hum of anxiety. It was the first thing I felt when I woke up in the morning, a knot of dread in my stomach before I was even fully conscious. My mind would immediately start racing, thinking about bills, payments, and the ever-present fear of the unexpected. What if my laptop breaks? What if I get sick and can't work? Every minor potential problem felt like a catastrophe waiting to happen because I had absolutely no financial safety net. This constant state of alert was draining. It affects your ability to think clearly, to concentrate on anything else. At work, I'd find my mind drifting away from meetings, my thoughts consumed by panicked mental arithmetic. I'd be staring at a document, but all I could see were the numbers from my credit card statements. It made me less productive, less engaged. I was physically present, but mentally, I was trapped in a whirlwind of financial worry. The fear of being found out was part of it too. The fear that my colleagues would see me as less capable if they knew the truth about my situation. Sleep offered little escape. I'd lie awake for hours, my heart pounding, my mind replaying every financial misstep. Or I'd wake up suddenly at 3 a.m, drenched in a cold sweat with a feeling of pure panic. The darkness always made the fears seem bigger, more insurmountable. I would imagine the worst-case scenarios: bailiffs at the door, being declared bankrupt, losing my job. These nighttime terrors left me exhausted and on edge the next day, making it even harder to cope with the daily pressures. The lack of proper rest created a vicious cycle, fueling the anxiety that was keeping me awake in the first place. The anxiety also manifested in physical ways. I had constant headaches, a tense jaw from clenching my teeth, and an upset stomach that never seemed to go away. My body was reacting to the stress, even when I was trying to pretend everything was fine. It was a constant physical reminder that I was not okay. This anxiety tax was the hidden cost of my bad decisions. It wasn't just about the money I owed, it was about the peace of mind I had lost. It was the price I paid every single day, in every waking moment and every restless night. Debt doesn't just affect your wallet, it seeps into your relationships, creating distance and isolation. Friends stop asking you out, thinking you're not interested, while you're quietly battling shame. Family conversations become tense. Every question about money feels like an accusation. Even dating is hard. How do you build intimacy when you're hiding such a big part of your life? Debt doesn't just cost money. It costs connection, intimacy, and the future you want. Before the debt took hold, my world felt full of possibilities. I loved exploring new parts of London, trying new cafes, going to gigs, and dreaming about future travels. My life felt expansive and open. But as the financial pressure mounted, my world began to shrink. It was a slow, almost imperceptible process at first. My universe, which had once felt as big as the city itself, gradually contracted until it was little more than the route from my flat to my office. Anything outside of that corridor felt unaffordable and therefore off-limits. The city I had moved to for its endless opportunities suddenly felt like a cage. My hobbies and interests were the first casualties. I used to love going to the cinema, but the price of a ticket and snacks started to feel like an impossible luxury. I stopped buying books, borrowing them from the library instead, but even the bus fare to get there felt like something I should be saving. My life became a series of subtractions. I cancelled my gym membership and tried to run outside instead, but often felt too drained by anxiety to even do that. The small things that brought colour and joy to my life were stripped away, one by one, leaving behind a very grey existence. This shrinking world affected my sense of self. So much of our identity is tied up in what we do, what we're passionate about. When I could no longer afford to do the things I loved, I started to feel like I was losing myself. I wasn't the girl who loved indie films anymore. I wasn't the girl who loved trying new restaurants. I was just the girl with debt. My life revolved around two things: earning money and worrying about money. There was no room for anything else. This loss of identity was profoundly disorienting. I'd look in the mirror and not quite recognize the person looking back at me. The geographical shrinking was mirrored by a mental one. I stopped thinking about the future in a hopeful way. My dreams became smaller, more practical. The ambition to travel the world was replaced by the desperate hope of one day being debt-free. The goal of buying a flat was replaced by the more immediate goal of just being able to meet my minimum payments that month. The debt had stolen my ability to dream big. It had forced my focus onto the immediate, stressful present, and the future became a place I was afraid to even think about. My world, both internal and external, had become a much smaller, sadder place. For a long time I thought of my money problems as a purely mental and emotional issue, a problem of shame, guilt and anxiety that lived inside my head. It took me a while to realize that my body was also keeping score. The constant stress was having a real physical impact on my health. I was always tired, a deep-in-your-bones kind of exhaustion that no amount of sleep could fix. I put it down to working hard and living in a busy city, but looking back, it was clearly the physical manifestation of chronic stress. My body was running on empty, constantly in a state of fight or flight. I also started getting sick all the time. I seemed to catch every cold and flu bug that was going around the office. My immune system, worn down by the constant anxiety and lack of proper rest, just couldn't cope. I developed persistent skin problems, with breakouts of acne and eczema that I'd never experienced before. My doctor told me it was likely stress-related and advised me to relax, which felt like a cruel joke at the time. How was I supposed to relax when I felt like I was drowning? It was frustrating to see my internal turmoil written so clearly on my face for everyone to see. My eating habits became erratic and unhealthy. Some days the anxiety would be so bad that I'd have no appetite at all, surviving on coffee and adrenaline. Other days, especially after a particularly stressful day at work, I would comfort eat. I'd buy cheap, sugary junk food because it gave me a momentary feeling of comfort, a brief escape from the misery. This, of course, just made me feel worse in the long run. It was bad for my body, bad for my already fragile self-esteem, and it was still money I shouldn't have been spending. It was another little cycle of self-sabotage. The most frightening physical symptom was the heart palpitations. Sometimes when I was trying to fall asleep or even just sitting at my desk, my heart would suddenly start racing and pounding in my chest for no apparent reason. The first time it happened, I was terrified I was having a heart attack. It was my body's way of sending out a distress signal, a physical alarm bell telling me that it could no longer handle the level of stress I was putting it under. It was a wake-up call. I realized my secret wasn't just hurting my bank balance and my social life, it was genuinely harming my physical health. Ultimately, the most profound emotional consequence of my financial mistakes was how they stole my joy. Debt is a thief. It sneaks into your life and quietly pockets all the little moments of happiness, leaving you with a sense of emptiness. I look back at that period of my life, my early 20s, which should have been a time of fun, freedom, and discovery. Instead, my memories are tinged with the grey filter of financial worry. Even the good moments were compromised because the anxiety was always there, lurking in the background, ready to pounce. I remember getting a small promotion at work. It should have been a moment of pure celebration. But my first thought wasn't, I did it. It was okay, this extra £100 a month can go towards the credit card. The joy was immediately neutralized by the debt. A friend's beautiful wedding, a family Christmas, a sunny day in the park. All these simple pleasures were tainted. I couldn't be fully present in any happy moment because a part of my brain was always elsewhere, calculating, worrying, and feeling guilty. The debt had a veto on my happiness. This theft of joy created a deep sense of bitterness and regret. I felt like I had been robbed of a significant chapter of my youth. I saw my friends enjoying their lives, seemingly without a care in the world, and I felt a sharp pang of envy. Why did I have to be the one struggling? Why had I made such stupid mistakes? I was angry at myself for getting into this mess and resentful of how it had curtailed my life. This bitterness was just another heavy emotion to add to the pile of guilt and shame, making it even harder to see a way out. This is perhaps the most insidious part of the emotional aftermath. It's not just about the stress and the anxiety, it's about the loss of happiness, the loss of time, the loss of the ability to simply enjoy the life you are living. I had worked so hard to build a life in London, but I wasn't able to enjoy any of it. I was like a tourist with a ticket to the best museum in the world, but I was so worried about the cost of the ticket that I couldn't even look at the paintings. The emotional toll was immense, and it became clear that just paying off the money wouldn't be enough. I had to find a way to heal the emotional damage too. My journey didn't start with a grand epiphany, but with a quiet shift, a first glimmer of light in the fog of my anxiety. It came from a podcast I found during my commute, where money was discussed with empathy, not judgment. For the first time, I heard my story in someone else's words, and realized I wasn't alone. It was as if someone opened a window in a dark room. The journey was just beginning, but for the first time, I felt a flicker of hope. Armed with a spark of hope, I finally faced the numbers I'd avoided for years. I gathered every bill, opened every envelope, and listed every debt. The total was worse than I'd feared, but seeing it all brought relief. The monster was no longer hiding. It was painful, but it was the first step toward taking back control. Creating a budget was uncomfortable, like a forensic look at my own bad habits. I saw how small expenses added up, and my first budget was pure fiction, unrealistic and impossible to stick to. The key was honesty and realism. I tracked my spending, made a plan I could actually follow, and allowed for small treats. Each week I stuck to my budget. I felt more in control, finally in the driver's seat of my finances. My spreadsheet and budget were just the start. I realized I couldn't hope for a miracle. I had to become the expert of my own finances. I dove into books, podcasts, and online communities, learning practical tips and reclaiming power over my money. It wasn't glamorous, but it was real. For the first time, I felt equipped to build a life of security, freedom, and choice. The journey out of debt is a marathon, not a sprint. At first, small payments felt like drops in the ocean, and it was easy to feel discouraged. But celebrating small wins, like sticking to my budget or paying off a store card, kept me motivated. Each milestone, no matter how minor, boosted my confidence. These small victories built the foundation for big shifts in my financial life. For months, my journey toward financial understanding was a solitary one. It was my secret project, something I worked on alone in the quiet of my flat. I had my books, my podcasts, and my spreadsheets, but I still hadn't broken the biggest taboo of all. I hadn't spoken to anyone about it. The shame, though lessened, was still there. The fear of judgment was still very real. But as I gained more confidence and knowledge, I realized that silence was the last piece of the old broken system I was clinging to. To truly move forward, I knew I had to let someone in. I had to tell someone the truth. I decided to tell my oldest friend Sarah. I chose her because I knew deep down that she was the least likely to judge me. I invited her over for a cup of tea, my stomach churning with nerves. I rehearsed what I was going to say 100 times in my head, but when she sat down on my sofa, I just burst into tears. Through my sobs, the whole story came tumbling out. The handbag, the credit cards, the lies, the fear, the shame, and the slow, painful process of trying to fix it all. I finally laid the entire ugly truth bare to another human being. Sarah didn't react the way I had feared. There was no shock, no horror, no lecture. She just listened. She let me say everything I needed to say without interruption. When I finally finished, exhausted and raw, she simply reached out, took my hand and said, "I'm so sorry you've been going through all of this alone. I'm so proud of you for facing it." In that moment, the remains of the shame that had held me captive for so long just dissolved. Her acceptance was like a healing balm. It validated everything I had been doing and annihilated the fear of being judged a failure. That single conversation changed everything. It broke the isolation that had been such a heavy part of my burden. Knowing that I had someone in my corner, someone who knew the real story and didn't think less of me for it, was incredibly freeing. It made the journey feel less lonely and the challenges feel more manageable. It taught me that vulnerability isn't a weakness, it's a strength. It's the key to connection. And connection is what helps us get through the hardest parts of our lives. Breaking the silence was the final crucial step in understanding my past and beginning to truly accept it. Fixing the numbers was only half the journey. The real challenge was rewriting my internal script, changing the voice in my head from harsh critic to compassionate friend. I learned to flip negative thoughts, practicing self-forgiveness and gratitude each day. Slowly, the kind voice grew louder, reminding me my worth isn't tied to money, but to how I treat myself. Mindful spending changed my life. Instead of buying on impulse, I created a pause, waiting 24 hours before any non-essential purchase. I'd ask, why do I want this? Is it a need or a want? This simple habit helped me appreciate what I already owned, find joy in simplicity, and make every purchase intentional. Living on a tight budget can make the world feel small and limited. But I learned to create new rituals of abundance, like my weekly money date with coffee and music, to celebrate what I had. I found joy in free museums, long walks, and library visits, discovering that a rich life isn't about spending, but about appreciating what's already here. Seeking closure on my healing journey, I tried an exercise, writing a letter to my younger self. I wrote with compassion, acknowledging her fears, dreams, and mistakes. I forgave her, validated her struggles, and thanked her for the lessons. As I finished, tears of release came. That letter became my ceremony of forgiveness, finally letting go of the weight I'd carried for years. Redefining success meant letting go of society's version, job titles, luxury, and status, and building my own. Now success is freedom, peace of mind, and strong relationships. It's a home-cooked meal, a walk with a friend, and time for what matters. I no longer chase comparison. I look at my life with gratitude and know I found my own version of success. My journey from that shiny London shop to now has left scars, financial and emotional. But scars aren't shameful, they're proof of healing and resilience. I've learned my worth isn't in possessions, and security comes from within. I am not my mistakes. I am what I learned from them. The choice to grow is always ours to make. If my story sounds like yours, know you're not alone. Many of us carry financial regrets, but there is a way through. Your journey is unique, but the first step is always the same. Be brave, face the truth, and forgive yourself. Every small step is a victory. Celebrate your progress. Your current circumstances are not your final destination. You are worthy of peace.